When you think about the golden age of 16-bit RPGs, the usual suspects always come to mind: Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger, and Secret of Mana. But there's one game that deserves to stand alongside those greats, yet often slips under the radar: Lufia II, Rise of the Sinistrals. At first glance, Lufia II looks like a typical JRPG: turn-based combat, a party of characters on a world-saving mission, and that unmistakable 16-bit aesthetic. But beneath the surface, the game offers so much more. What sets Lufia II apart from other RPGs of the time is its masterful blend of puzzles, exploration, and strategic battles. The Ancient Cave, a 99-floor randomized dungeon, gave Lufia II serious replay value, while its character-driven narrative injected genuine emotion into the experience. For fans of old-school gaming, Lufia II is a nostalgic treasure trove. If you've never experienced the game, prepare to be transported back to a time when RPGs were at their peak. A time when gameplay depth, storytelling, and art design all converged to create something timeless. If you're already a fan, then this is your chance to relive those moments that made this game special. The story of Lufia II is a deeply personal, character-driven tale set against the backdrop of a classic good versus evil conflict. What makes Lufia II so special is how it carefully balances epic battles with the emotional journeys of its cast. This game isn't just about saving the world from ancient evils. It's also about love, sacrifice, and the bonds that tie its heroes together. Taking place approximately 100 years before the events of the original Lufia and the Fortress of Doom, Lufia II serves as a prequel, telling the origin story of Maxim, the legendary warrior, and his fight against the Sinistrals, godlike beings hell-bent on conquering the world. At the heart of the story is the central conflict between Maxim and the Sinistrals, particularly the mysterious leader, Daus. But unlike many RPGs of the era that often focus solely on the larger-than-life threat, Lufia II grounds its narrative in the relationships between its characters. One of the standout elements of Lufia II's story is how it uses the Sinistrals as more than just typical evil overlords. Daus, along with his fellow Sinistrals, Gades, Amon, and Erim, are imbued with personalities and motivations that go beyond simple villainy. While they do seek power and domination, there's a sense of tragic grandeur to their existence, particularly with Erim, whose complex role in the story leads to some surprising and heartbreaking twists. These aren't just mindless foes, they represent real challenges, both physically and morally, for Maxim and his companions. As the story builds towards its dramatic conclusion, Lufia II presents players with one of the most memorable endings in RPG history. Without spoiling too much, let's just say that the final battle isn't just a physical confrontation, but an emotional one. In short, the story of Lufia II doesn't just rely on standard RPG tropes of heroes and villains. Instead, it's a deeply personal narrative about love, sacrifice, and destiny. It's one of the reasons why fans still look back on the game with such fondness. It managed to craft a world where the characters felt real and their struggles mattered. While Lufia II may have initially grabbed players with its story and character development, it's the gameplay that truly cemented its place as a cult classic in the world of RPGs. At its core, Lufia II offers a satisfying combination of traditional turn-based combat, exploration, and puzzle solving. But it's the way these elements come together that makes the game stand out. For a game released in 1995, Lufia II was ahead of its time in how it balanced action and strategy, giving players more to do than just grinding through battles. One of the most defining features of Lufia II is its puzzle-heavy dungeon design. Unlike many RPGs of the era, where dungeons were straightforward mazes filled with random encounters, Lufia II introduced an almost Zelda-like puzzle element to its exploration. Every dungeon features a variety of puzzles, ranging from block-pushing challenges to trap avoidance and switch-based mechanics that require players to think carefully about their next move. These puzzles aren't just tacked on either, they're central to the game's identity. On the combat side, Lufia II sticks to the tried-and-true formula of turn-based battles, but with a few twists that make it both challenging and strategic. Battles are initiated by coming into contact with enemies on the map, rather than being random encounters. This was a big deal at the time because it gave players a sense of control over whether or not they wanted to engage in battle, adding a layer of strategy to exploration. You could see enemies coming, which allowed you to avoid or prepare for fights, especially when you're low on health or items. Another gameplay feature that stands out is the Ancient Cave, one of the most famous aspects of Lufia II. The Ancient Cave is a massive 99-floor randomly generated dungeon that strips your party of all their equipment and abilities, forcing you to start from scratch. The only way to advance is to collect new gear and items within the dungeon itself, which resets each time you enter. It's the ultimate test of strategy, patience, and luck. While you can leave the cave at any time, losing all your progress, making it to the final floor and defeating the boss is an immense challenge. For players who love the thrill of a roguelike dungeon crawl, the Ancient Cave offers a surprising amount of replay value. In terms of pacing, Lufia II strikes a near-perfect balance. The puzzles break up the action enough to keep the game from feeling monotonous, and the sense of progression is constant. As you explore the world and unlock new abilities, you never feel like you're stuck doing the same thing over and over. Whether you're solving intricate puzzles, engaging in tactical battles, or testing your skills in the Ancient Cave, there's always something to keep you engaged. Overall, Lufia II delivers an experience that goes beyond the standard RPG formula of its time. Its mix of puzzles, tactical combat, and deep exploration creates a game that is as mentally stimulating as it is emotionally satisfying. The gameplay mechanics are a perfect complement to the story, making Lufia II a standout entry in the SNES library, and one that still holds up remarkably well even by today's standards. In an era when the 16-bit RPG was at its peak, Lufia II, Rise of the Sinistrals was a shining example of how to push the Super Nintendo's graphical and sound capabilities to their limits. While Lufia II may not have been as visually groundbreaking as titles like Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy VI, its art direction and soundtrack contributed to the game's deep emotional core and its lasting impact on players. The graphics and sound work together to create a world that feels alive and filled with personality, even within the constraints of the SNES hardware. Lufia II utilizes a vibrant, colorful 16-bit art style that immediately feels at home with other JRPGs of its time. The sprite work in Lufia II is crisp and detailed, especially when it comes to character designs. Each character, from the stoic Maxim to the powerful Salon, is crafted with a distinct appearance that makes them easily recognizable even at a glance. The environments in Lufia II are varied and thoughtfully designed, with each town, dungeon, and overworld area feeling distinct. From lush forests to ancient ruins, the game does a fantastic job of creating a sense of place and adventure. What really stands out, however, is the puzzle-focused dungeon design. The dungeons aren't just backdrops for combat, they are interactive spaces filled with levers, traps, and intricate mechanisms that push the player to think about their surroundings. When it comes to combat visuals, Lufia II does something a little different compared to other RPGs of the era. Instead of a side-view perspective like Final Fantasy or Chrono Trigger, Lufia II employs a front-facing battle system. In this setup, players see the enemies up close, which allows for some intricate and detailed enemy designs. The Sinistrals, in particular, are impressively drawn, with each one looking more menacing than the last. But it's not just the graphics that make Lufia II a standout, it's the sound design and most notably the soundtrack. The game's music, composed by Yasunori Shiono, is one of the unsung heroes of the 16-bit RPG era. The soundtrack perfectly captures the mood of each moment, from the somber, emotional story beats to the triumphant battle themes. Each area of the game is accompanied by a fitting piece of music, and the tracks effortlessly shift from lighthearted and adventurous to tense and dramatic, depending on what's happening in the story. The game's standard battle theme is fast-paced and energetic, providing a sense of urgency that keeps you on edge during encounters. However, it's the boss battle music where Lufia II truly kicks things up a notch. The theme that plays during the Sinistral battles, in particular, is a sweeping, powerful track that immediately raises the stakes. You can feel the weight of the conflict in the music, making these fights against godlike enemies feel even more epic. Lufia II, Rise of the Sinistrals, may not have had the most technically advanced graphics or the largest orchestral soundtrack of its era, but what it did have was a perfect marriage of visual and audio design that gave the game a unique identity. The graphics, though pixelated by today's standards, were charming and detailed, creating a world that felt alive and immersive. The soundtrack, on the other hand, was nothing short of masterful, elevating every aspect of the gameplay and story with its emotive and memorable melodies. Together, the graphics and sound in Lufia II helped create a timeless experience that remains deeply nostalgic for those who played it and unforgettable for those who have yet to discover its magic. When Lufia II, Rise of the Sinistrals was released in 1995, it had the misfortune of coming out during one of the most competitive periods in RPG history. Titles like Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger, and Secret of Mana were dominating the scene, each bringing innovative mechanics, breathtaking visuals, and immersive stories. In this crowded space, Lufia II didn't get the widespread attention that some of its peers did. However, over time, the game's unique blend of puzzles, character-driven narrative, and deep mechanics earned it a loyal following. Decades later, Lufia II has solidified itself as a cult classic, an underdog RPG that continues to capture the hearts of fans long after the Super Nintendo's golden era. At the time of its release, many RPGs were focused primarily on exploration, combat, and leveling up, often leaving puzzle solving as a minor element. But Lufia II took a different approach, seamlessly integrating complex puzzles into its dungeon designs. This was a breath of fresh air for RPG enthusiasts who wanted a more interactive experience, and it set the game apart from its peers. These puzzles were not just side activities, they were essential to the progression of the game, adding a layer of depth and challenge that appealed to players who enjoyed games like The Legend of Zelda. This focus on puzzles influenced future RPGs and action-adventure games, proving that well-thought-out brain teasers could elevate gameplay. Lufia II may not have directly inspired a wave of imitators, but its impact can be seen in small ways throughout the genre. The Ancient Cave, a massive 99-floor, randomly generated dungeon, is one of the most notable features of Lufia II, and it laid the groundwork for the roguelike mechanics we see in modern RPGs. The idea of a randomized dungeon where players start from scratch each time and can only keep a limited number of items was a precursor to the roguelite elements we now see. Additionally, the capsule monster system introduced in Lufia II was an early take on the idea of raising and evolving creatures that aid you in battle. While not as fleshed out as systems seen in later games like Pokemon or Final Fantasy's summon system, it showed how companion creatures could add a new layer to party dynamics and strategy. The ability to raise these monsters and watch them evolve into more powerful forms was a feature ahead of its time, foreshadowing the creature-raising mechanics that would become popular in games just a few years later. The game's impact can also be seen in its dedicated fan base, which has kept the spirit of Lufia II alive through fan translations, ROM hacks, and community projects. Despite not having a massive franchise to back it up, Lufia II has managed to remain relevant because of the passion of its fans. This passion eventually led to remakes and reimaginings, such as Lufia: Curse of the Sinistrals for the Nintendo DS in 2010. Though this remake significantly altered the gameplay, moving from turn-based combat to action RPG mechanics, it's a testament to the lasting influence of Lufia II that such a remake even exists. In the grander scope of RPG history, Lufia II, Rise of the Sinistrals, is a game that never quite reached the commercial heights of its competitors, but its legacy lives on in the hearts of those who experienced its magic. For many retro gaming enthusiasts, it's a title that showcases everything that was great about 16-bit RPGs: deep, emotional storytelling, challenging and rewarding gameplay, and a soundtrack that sticks with you long after you've put down the controller. Lufia II might not have had the massive success of some of its contemporaries, but its unique blend of mechanics and heartfelt narrative ensure that it remains an essential experience for anyone who loves classic RPGs.